Here we are at the North Cemetery in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
On somebody else. So she decided that, they were about to get married, everything was set up. And the day came, she's dressed, the reverend is there, and all of a sudden things change. And they take her out of the room, and they take Whipple out of the room. And the next time he sees Mehitable, she is, like the story goes, divested of her wedding garments. And so she just tells him that she is not going to marry him that night. And of course, this is a big offense, leaving someone standing up at the altar, a man. So he goes, he says, being the kind of man that he was, well, madam, if it isn't tonight, it's never. And she goes, I'm sorry, but it's not tonight. So he walked out of the room, never to see Mehitable again. Mehitable had her eyes on somebody else named Treadwell, Robert Treadwell's, who she married a few months later. Then Whipple, Mehitable and Whipple were cousins, as were everybody in Portsmouth. They used to marry cousins like crazy. So that was a cousin, so he met another cousin, Catherine Whipple. She was, I don't know that that's her, I think she's over here. But Catherine was the daughter of John Whipple, John Moffat, and he was very, very wealthy. Again, another uncle, cousin type of relationship. The shock has been so that nobody knew that Catherine and William had gotten married until, of course, she became pregnant, at which time, the news was let broadly known, because I think that I don't think the general really wanted to take the chance of having another rejection. So anyways, he was at Battle of Saratoga. He escorted the prisoners that surrendered from Burgoyne's army all the way to Cambridge so they can be shipped home. He was in the Battle of Bennington, defending the western flank of New Hampshire with just about everybody from Portsmouth. The Battle of Bennington was almost 100% financed by John Langdon, the first governor of New Hampshire. So he was an excellent man all the way to the end of his life. At the end, he became a judge. He was one of those itinerant judges. He fell off his horse and brought him home, and he died shortly thereafter. But his last request was to his nephew, who was a doctor, one of the 3 doctors in town, to have an autopsy done to find out what the cause was, so it could be prevented for future generation. That's the kind of man he was. So the doctor, I believe it was Dr. Cutter, did an autopsy on him, and they discovered that just about all of his arteries were blocked in his heart.
Oh.
So they saw hardship like we haven't seen, and they endured it. It wasn't all, imagine a world that has nothing, no communication, no nothing. I heard one of his diaries, and he was very lucky one day on his way back to find a place where he could stay, that there was not too many fleas, and he can actually have a cup of tea and some bread. Mm-hmm. So the hardships were intense, but they endured it, and they endured it to the end. Mm-hmm. So are we doing in time? All right. We only have time to really go around to a couple of different people. This is Captain Thomas Thompson. This is the first captain of the Raleigh. The Raleigh, like I mentioned, is the flag that appears on the New Hampshire flag. We have one right now. He was the first captain of it. One of the people that got to see in the privateering trying to get as much supplies as they could. In those days, there was no supplies, so people decided that privateering was the thing. So let's just find a ship, let's go out there and see what we can get. But he was the first, he was one of them, captain. We also have Governor Whipple. General Whipple had a slave that became very famous because he went with him to the Battle of Bennington. And so supposedly he said to his slave, I expect you to act gallantly in battle. And he said, if I was fighting for my liberty, I would fight to the last of my blood. And at that point, he became free because Governor Whipple said, okay, you're a free man now. And he is also buried right around the corner. And we can tell that he was a veteran. He fought as a veteran and paid as a veteran because he's so recognized as a veteran early on by the Daughters of the American Revolution, who put a marker on his grave. On our way over there, Captain Salter, one of the men who actually was another captain, privateering, took care of safeguarding the Piscataqua River and then the entry to Portsmouth when there were concerns that we were going to be fired on and bombed by the British.
Any connection between Salter and Salt and Saul?
Salter,
Salt and Saul.
I'm not sure. But this is the tomb of Prince Whipple. And just in case you were wondering, you have two stones. It's not that a child is buried under this one. It's just that in those days you had a headstone and you had a footstone. And most tombs, especially, would have that. You see a little one? So, but that's basically the reason why they had it. Now, this tomb over here is the tomb of Woodbury Langdon. Now, I'm giving you the really fast tour because I usually will take you to that side as well. But if you notice, most of the streets in Portsmouth and the names of the people in this town, they're the same. So a lot of the names of the streets are named after this man. Woodbury Langdon was the brother of John Langdon. Was an older brother, sometimes he behaved like a much younger brother because he was always in trouble. So they both started together in the accounting office of the Sherborne family. And of course, they got access to their family and what have you. And like I said, everybody knew each other, everybody was cousin to each other. So they both became interested in the same girl, Sarah. Sarah was supposed to be, was very vibrant, was very cheerful and what have you. But John, one of the brothers, thought that he wanted to get some sea experience, so he decided to become a sea captain and go away. Well, while he was gone, Woodbury decided that became really good friends with Sarah, and to the point that they decided to get married. So they sent a letter to John telling them of what their decision and what have you. A letter that I have seen the letter telling John that Sarah was agreeable to the same feelings and what have you. I have not seen the letter that John Langdon may have sent back. Maybe because if I was him, I probably would have just threw him into the ocean or use it in the fire or something. But anyways, he was a very hesitant helper for the Revolutionary War. At first, he was not a son of liberty, not like his brother. He was like ambivalent. But he went to England and to try to save some of his investments and what have you, came back by way of New York, and he got apprehended there. So being that he was apprehended, he eventually escaped. After that, he was a son of liberty. So he I think had asthma. And in those days, if you couldn't breathe, if you have breathing issues, they would tell you, well, just go out for a walk and get some fresh air. Probably the same thing that he was allergic to. And one day he just got a really bad attack of asthma and passed away.
Oh.
So him and Sarah had 8 children. So it was a very prolific marriage. And I always kid about the fact that maybe John and Woodbury kid about, okay, who's going to take the higher ground tomb? Whoever dies first is going to take it. Well, he died first. So he took the higher ground tomb. Maybe it's the kind of wager that John Langdon was happy he lost. But he missed his brother considerably. But all his Landon family, his family is buried in there, as many as they could fit. In those days, you would have a door. All right, if the tomb wasn't full, the door would be shut after the next person was entombed. When it was full, then it would be sealed, a marker put on it, and the door removed. So, anyways, let's move over to the shade, because I know it's hot in the sun. You don't have enough of a breeze. If you're going to come this way, it's a lot easier to get to that side. You don't want to get a big there. Watching the sun. When I first came here looking for John Langdon, I couldn't find him because there were so many Landons everywhere. And there were big families.
Michelle Obama speaking at Harvard said that, the pioneer of the Declaration of Independence was not born in the United States. They were not citizens. They were not Americans.
He's talking like someone doesn't know. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't. That's just my personal opinion. Now this man, I just recently found him, and I thought that it was very interesting. Captain Kennard, he was captain of some of the privateering vessels and the first ship by the name of Portsmouth. He was a captain of. And most of those ships were used for privateering. So I have just started to do some research on him, and that's why the flag. Someone that I know, he likes to put flags on everybody that served, that was either a revolutionary soldier or died. So if you see all those flags, that's what this person does on his own. He just comes identifying this stuff. So anyways, from on this way, I will do Mr. Landon. They have to be a prolific family. Oh yeah. Remember that story about Whipple and that's his grandson, their grandson. And there are many people buried in there, but you don't see the names outside. Again, you see the door, you see that it's sealed. Chances are there isn't just one person buried there.
What kind of a name?
Audiorn?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I know that at one time the Audiorns owned in the early 1600s the deed for the state of New Hampshire. So I was like, I'm not sure where the name came from. But this is probably the most illustrious man in the cemetery right here. And for those of you who are state representatives, I'm the kind of person that just young people hate, because if I see them at the counter or I see them outside looking for a contribution, I said, pop quiz, tell me, so I asked him, who was the first governor of New Hampshire? I don't know. And I'm like, he was with an adult. He goes, I think I know that, but I'm not sure. What I'm finding out that people that have been raised in the city of Portsmouth have no idea that the cemetery is here, have no idea that this man even was the first governor, was governor 3 times of New Hampshire. Not only that, he was one of the conspirators, if we can call it that, of the siege of Fort William and Mary, which was the first really act of rebellion locally. And it was him. The way that the word came through was that Paul Revere came down before he did his famous ride. He came down to meet with the Sons of Liberty in Portsmouth. Now, the Sons of Liberty was there were several leaders. One of them was Samuel Tutts, very powerful man, very wealthy man in Portsmouth. So they met. They went to Studley's Tavern. John Langdon joined them there, as did many others in the city of Portsmouth. Before long, they had a big group, a huge group that marched to Fort William and Mary. The word that Paul Revere came to bring was, the governor is thinking about reinforcing Fort William and Mary. If you want the stuff that is in there now, you got to act. December 1773. So they did. They went over there, took everything they could carry with them, put it on a barge, and took it upriver and hid it. Now, the following day, knowing that there were other things in there, you had John Sullivan that came out from Dover and said, we forgot all this stuff. So this other group that had John Sullivan in it went over there and took even more items that they say eventually ended up in the Battle of Bunker Hill. But we're not absolutely certain about that. He was first voted to go as a representative to the the second congressional in Philadelphia. But he discovered that they wanted to build ships, and that's what he did. So he came back to Portsmouth to build ships. And he was replaced by, I should know that. What is that? He was replaced by someone else whose name escapes me right now. So he ended up not being the signer of the Declaration of Independence as he could have. All right. So as fate would have it, the red little helicopter that was coming around. As fate would have it, he would be elected to just. He'd always been involved. He was one of the main citizens of Portsmouth, the main citizens of New Hampshire. Would get a leadership position anywhere and everywhere he went because of who he was. All right. So in 1787. They were thinking about doing this thing called the Constitution. After all the battles, like I said, he was a financier of the Battle of Bennington, so he was extremely involved in all of these things that were happening. In 1787, he got elected to go to Washington, to Philadelphia, in New York, to represent New Hampshire. They were drafting the Constitution. He didn't get there the first week they started, but he got there. And Nicholas Gilman was the other man that went. He couldn't afford most of the stuff. He could not even afford his clothes. John Langdon paid for him to go. He has a huge, if I was going to tell you everything that John Langdon did, I could stand here and talk to you for a solid hour. It's just amazing, all of this stuff that he was involved with. But in those days, he voted for the Constitution, came back to New Hampshire, and discovered that people really didn't want the Constitution. They had been living under self-autonomy for like 10 years, ever since the governor of New Hampshire had just packed up and left. So they figured, why are we going to submit ourselves under all these rules? Eventually they'll become too powerful. Maybe, self-fulfilling words, I don't know. And they will oppress us worse than England ever did. But he thought that in order to become a great nation, we needed to come together. And the Federalist Papers, the Federalist Constitution didn't do it. We needed something else. So he came over here, and the first vote that they took, knowing that he didn't have the votes, he asked for an adjournment, January 1788. 6 months later, the assemblies met again. By that time, he was a governor. Then, June 17, 1788, the vote comes again, this time a meeting in Congress. This time it passes by 10 votes. After all the finagling in the world happening behind the scenes, it happened. You know, it's like, you talk about people being told, don't come to vote if you're going to vote against it, or, you know, let's go for a drink before you vote, then let's talk about it, and just, it was...
Same thing happens now in the
The
legislature.
same thing is happening now. So anyways, he got it passed by 10 votes. So he was the one that sent notification to George Washington telling him, we have been the 9th state. We are the cornerstone, the great arch. There was competition between us and Virginia to see which one would pass it first, because those 9 states, which was a requirement on the Constitution, 2/3 of all of the colonies needed to vote in order for it to become active. So John Langdon wanted New Hampshire to be part of that arch, and he got it. It was a huge celebration in Portsmouth in those days. A celebration like that had not been seen in, I don't think, ever since, maybe since the war ended, the World War II ended. But it was a huge celebration. Then he got elected as the first senator, because the Constitution required that you had 2 senators. He got elected as one of them. And being the kind of man that he was, he is elected as the president of the Senate, while they decided to have this first office that requires now to have a president be voted on. There hasn't been a president up until that day. So he was the one that monitors the voting. He was the one that, you know, notified George Washington that he has been elected. And from that time that George Washington was elected to the time when he actually took his oath of office, he was the president pro tem of the United States. A forgotten tomb in the city of Portsmouth. I've been after them, do something. Because it's like, people in New Hampshire should know who this man is, and they don't. It's part of the heritage. It's part of our history. So,
There must have been a time when the grade school came here as a field trip. There must have been a time when that stopped or something.
I have no idea.
I can't
But
imagine.
if I would like to see it a requirement that everybody in Portsmouth would come through here just to learn. I mean, this is in your backyard and you don't know. You have no idea. This is just a few of the people that made a huge mark in history that are buried here.
As long as I've been a school bus driver, the only thing that we go see is the Strawberry Bank. We never have come here.
Yeah.
The,
I'm like,
the law of New Hampshire says they shall teach the New Hampshire Constitution in 4th grade. Yet here we are, and nobody knows. So that tells
Nobody
you how
knows.
well it's taught.
this man was the one that made it so that the Constitution would be active and that New Hampshire would be that last.
I'm going to
block.
start back because I've got to teach, and it's
Okay.
like a
Yeah, we should
5-minute
start back.
walk.
But anyways,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
if you come back with more time someday,
Yeah.
just let me know, and I'll be
Yeah.
happy to just give you the
yeah.
unabbreviated tour.
So are you with the Historical Society?
I am with nobody.
Oh, you just do it all
I
for
was
yourself?
like, I came looking for one of this. I was studying the Constitution, and I came here looking for the signers. And I said, well, there's a signer in here somewhere. Where is he? And I saw him on this little dusty old dirty grave, and I'm like, then I went to the city council. And I said, yes. I went to the city council and said, why is there this grave of this man who has done, and I enumerated all of the things he did. Why does it look like that? So ever since, I guess I'm the latest spokesperson for the cemetery, but there has been others through the years. There have been others after me. So
What is your name, ma'am?
Sue?
Sue. What's
Sue
your last-
Polidura.
Okay, great.
So on the date of the attack at Fort William and Mary, I was under the impression that it was shortly before the riot of Paul Revere, which I can't remember was 1775. And Battle of Bunker Hill was 1776.
He came here early. This is what not many people know. He came here. His first ride was to Portsmouth to talk to Samuel Cox.
And what was that year?
1773.
So there was quite a bit of time between that and the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Yep. The hostilities haven't really started.
I didn't see that gap there, Carrie. I thought you were going to take a leap over this thing.